talking a bit about Cervalces scotti. This is a type of cervid from here in North America. We find them from about Alaska all the way to the eastern United States. So we've known about Cervalces for quite a bit of time. It was originally found in 1805 by both Lewis and Clark, and then later named in about 1885 by William Meriwether Scott, who originally named Cervalces scotti after himself. So originally, Cervalces remains were found in Big Bone Lick, and this was an area in Kentucky where there was a lot of kind of boggy, muddy sort of area, and it had a high amount of salt that was built up there. And so animals were going and getting attracted in by the salt, and later would get preserved when they die in sort of these swampy bogland terrain. Swamp is really, really good for fossilization. It means that when an animal falls down in that area, it's going to get covered pretty quickly, and so that area is pretty perfect as far as fossilization goes. Originally who sent Lewis and Clark out there was Thomas Jefferson. One of the main reasons why he wanted to send those two out west was specifically to look for things like mastodon. Now we've got the toothed one just right here. This is one of the first types of fossils that came back with Lewis and Clark, and eventually it was kept in collection by Jefferson. Jefferson, unfortunately, did not have a very good time, at least getting shipments of these fossils. It's lucky that Cervalces actually made it back to him. Originally, some of the shipments never made it to their destined location. Like one of them that was supposed to go off to Jefferson actually got misshipped off to Britain instead, and then sold on the markets out there. Another one got crashed along the Mississippi, and then the boxes were washed up shore and then rifled by militiamen. So honestly, it's probably pretty lucky that we even had Cervalces at 1805. This is a picture of them. And so you can see that you've got most of the same, or most similarities with modern day moose. Just the antler shape is a bit different. The muzzle's a bit thinner, but overall they look fairly similar. Now we figure that Cervalces probably started in Eurasia, or at least some sort of relative of Cervalces at least. And then they would have moved over the Bering Strait into North America. So for a long time, Asia and Siberia were connected to Alaska, and so this allowed a lot of species to actually make it over into the Americas from Asia. So your things like mastodons, your mammoths, bears, dogs, cats, a lot of those things were immigrants from Asia. Now Cervalces was of course living from Alaska to the eastern United States, and a lot of their habitat during that time was kind of just like modern Canada. They would have been living in these black spruce parklands with a lot of boggy terrain, and so you would have seen a lot of black spruce, a lot of modern day berries that you see around Canada. You're going to also find in Cervalces habitat, and so really it's just like Alberta. Now Cervalces in the cervid family tree, he's going to be right next to modern day moose, so kind of on this line right here. With Cervalces, his name just means elk-moose. Cervus being elk, Alces being moose, and so he gets referred to as the stag moose. Elk are all the way over here, right there. And so they're a bit distant. The main similarity they have with moose is sort of the antler shape. And from a couple of specimens we've actually found, they were preserved really, really well up in Alaska in a riverbed. And they actually still had the skin and hair preserved on them. And that resembled elk pelt, pretty much down to the color and the shape, strands of hair. So up there we've got some pictures of some of his relatives. So we've got Scotti down here. You can see a sort of unique pattern of antler from the front view. Now up here, up top, this is another species in the genus of Cervalces called Cervalces latifrons. And so they've got that more palmate spread. They were sticking over in Eurasia, whereas Cervalces scotti was mainly over here in North America. We've got modern-day moose on the bottom right, and then up at the top right, we've got another relative of them called the Chinese water deer. And so that's an Asian species. Now, these are some of the fauna you see alongside Cervalces. Of course, he's right down here. We found them pretty commonly along with the American mastodon, and muskox were pretty common around them. There's also a species of beaver from the area called castroides. Just imagine a beaver, but around the size of a black bear. Now, some of the reasons why we don't see Cervalces, we don't really know all of them. Some of them we just kind of have to guess, really. The one that really gets talked about the most is, well, there's an ice sheet that appeared right as Cervalces started to go extinct. And this would have covered most of North America. And this is just an ice sheet. That's not just snow. That is pure ice. That would have frozen a lot of Cervalces' food sources, as well as pushed animals into different locations that they weren't used to before, causing a lot of animals to actually migrate. Of course, with animals migrating, you have things like caribou and reindeer. They were moving down from Canada, and they're a lot better built for the cold than Cervalces. Caribou are able to survive in temperatures of -30 degrees pretty easily. They've got actually this really cool adaptation. They'll keep their legs at just above freezing temperatures, and they'll move the unneeded blood into their torso to actually help keep it warmer. One of the best suited animals for living in the cold, so they definitely beat Cervalces in those ice sheets. As for moose, they would have dominated the bogs and the swamps that weren't getting covered by ice and snow. And so they would have been pushed out of the bogs as well, meaning that Cervalces really didn't have anywhere to go. You can go to the next slide. Part of the reason why moose are really well adapted at living at these boggy, swampland areas is actually their nose. It's pretty advanced. You can see how thick it is just right in the front. They'll use that as a way to actually shut off those nostrils, and so they can dive underwater and search for more food like algae and whatnot. And so that's another type of food source that moose have, and Cervalces again left with nothing. And so all of these factors combining, along with possible evidence that Cervalces might have even been hunted by humans at the end of its reign, that about concludes it. So do you guys have any questions before we move on? Yeah.
How social were they? Do we have any indication?
We don't have any indication, sadly. I'd imagine probably like modern-day moose. We don't have any evidence of, you know, herds like caribou or whitetails or anything like that. So I'm assuming kind of like modern-day moose.